On this episode of Sustainable Horizons,
our thesis statement is cruises suck.
Flying sucks, but cruises are worse.
Stop taking those. Cut it off. Cut it out.
They're not great.
Everyone say it with me. Most cruise ships suck.
Guess what?
What?
We're back.
Sweet.
With a super hot topic.
I'm going to just come right out and say it. Our thesis statement is cruises suck. And we're going to tell you why. If you can guess by the title, why cruises suck.
Exactly. Well, to start, I think for me, I learned it while I was in school, but I took like a sustainable tourism class. But it shook me because we always hear about flying, and flying sucks. But cruises are worse for the environment. And that just shook me to my core a little bit because I just didn't understand how. Jets in the air, they're heavy, a lot of fuel. But I guess same thing. Boats in the water, they're heavy, a lot of fuel.
And I mean, the big ones are straight up city on water.
I know. What's the new one called? The big one, the new one.
Yeah, the one with the commercials and stuff.
Yes, exactly.
They said it's unsinkable.
I'm sure the Titanic thought the same way. But to dive into the numbers, we'll give you a little bit of why cruises suck. So a medium-sized cruise ship spews greenhouse gas emissions equivalent to those of 12,000 cars. So it's not a small amount. And that's just one little ship. But to break it down a little bit further into something that's more digestible of a number, a 5-night, 1,200-mile cruise results in about 1,100 pounds of CO2 emissions. So this is going to be the same as flying the same distance, 1,200 miles, and staying in a hotel. So doing all that, it would emit half.
And I'm assuming that's per person.
Per person. And this accounting doesn't even take into the fact that you kind of usually have to fly to a port destination to even get on a cruise. So they're not taking that in. It's just the 5 nights on the cruise, 1,100 pounds of CO2, where the same thing flying and staying in a hotel is going to be about 550, half of that. This is a significant amount of emissions that go up every single year. So another statistic I found very interesting, because we see, at least here in America, there's a lot of the cruises through the Caribbean and different things like that. But apparently, they are very popular in the Mediterranean as well. So the cruise and ferry ships in the Mediterranean, and ferries I get, because there's a lot of hop-in islands and things like that. But those cruise and ferry ships emit about 10% of the total global shipping emissions. And just that alone.
Wow.
Just a small little tiny area. When you think about what we're doing cross-Atlantic and things like that.
When I think of shipping boats as being like the environmental problem that they are, what I'm mostly picturing is like all of like those tanker vessels that are bringing all our Amazon products all across the globe. So to hear that the cruises are that much.
Are 10%. And the cruises in the Mediterranean.
Yeah.
Not even the cruises in the Caribbean and the ones out of Norway and Alaska and all of that. So if you were to define that number, it's going to be significantly higher than all of that. So it's a big impact that this type of tourism and traveling kind of does. And that doesn't even take into the account that a lot of these cruise companies, especially the US-based ones, have been caught dumping toxic sludge into the ocean. So not only are we emitting the CO2 emissions from everything that they're doing on board, but also they're dumping nothing good into the oceans.
Because it's all of the human waste, so they call that black water, so stuff that comes out of your toilets, straight into the ocean. There's gray water, so when you wash your hands and you shower, that's gray water into the ocean. Another thing that I was looking into was food waste. Because pretty much every single one of these cruises is like, all you can eat buffets and eat as much as you can. Carnival, which operates brands including Holland America, Carnival Cruise Line, Princess Cruises, and others, generates about 1.3 pounds of food waste per person each day on average. The average cruise ship has about 5,000 to 7,000 people. So that's a little over 5,000 to 7,000 pounds of food waste every single day that cruise is out there. And one of the main ways that they handle this food waste is they put it into a biodigester or dehydrator, specifically with a biodigester. So that's basically a tub of bacteria, kind of like our human stomach, that will break down that food. When I first saw that, I was like, oh, cool. They're going to use that for energy. There's a thing called anaerobic digestion, which generates energy and can use it. No, they're not doing that. They are just putting in the biodigester and then dumping it into the ocean, which, in case you didn't know, that's kind of an ecological disaster. Because guess what? That's a lot of nutrients and whatnot that are not normal for marine life that is now just there. And animals end up consuming that to some degree and or causes algae blooms and other types of problems in the water.
Yeah, it's similar to like everybody's like pick up after your dog. It's because what your dog eats is not normally found decaying in the woods. So it really just messes with the ecosystem. Same thing here. Put a bunch of human food in a digester and then just dump it into the ocean. It's not meant to grow there. It's not meant to be there. And it's not meant to be consumed there.
All that, not to mention the single-use utensils, cups, other types of physical waste, candy wrappers, plastic wrapping. A lot of cruises will incinerate that. And if you haven't guessed by now, they dump it into the water.
It's just not good. So in January of this year, the Princess Cruise Line, owned by Carnival, was fined $1 million by the U.S. Department of Justice after pleading guilty to violating a second time 5-year probation. This was imposed in 2017 after it pleaded guilty to felony charges for stemming from the deliberate dumping of oil-contaminated waste from one of its vessels and intentionally acting to cover it up. This was a $40 million penalty that was dished out in 2017, and it was the largest ever fine for an intentional pollution from a ship. So they're starting to crack down on this type of pollution and just really thinking about what these ships are trying to get away with. There's a lot of greenwashing in this industry as well. In 2019, while still on probation, the Princess Cruise Line was fined another $20 million for 6 further violations, including the dumping of plastic waste into the Bahamian waters and falsifying records. So they don't dump just oil and the gas and the leftovers, nor does it just the food waste, but all of the plastic that they do can sometimes end up in the ocean because it's easier than paying to have it shipped off the ship or taken off the ship, shipped somewhere else, and then gotten rid of. They're just cutting corners everywhere.
Yep, and it's not just the waste that's being generated on the ships and the carbon emissions that come from moving them. It's the noise that the ships produce from the engines and other activities happening on said vessel that deeply impacts the sea life. Because we're familiar with how like dolphins and whales and other types of fish communicate by like echolocation type of stuff. With all that noise, that makes their ability to communicate a lot more difficult. It also inhibits animals from being able to forage for food, and it generally increases the stress level, causing them to not be able to reproduce as well, not be able to escape predators. Overall makes their life a lot worse. And then already impacted animals from all of the pollution that we just talked about are now bombarded with constant noise all across the ocean.
Nobody likes just the constant hum or noise. And yeah, to succumb the sea life to that is just unfair because they don't have an option in it. But we've kind of talked a little bit about the environmental disasters. And I want to touch quickly on the human disaster of this whole tourism concept of cruises and ships like that. One of the biggest things that you hear sometimes through the news is the increasing outrage from communities that these ships dock at. But think about islands like the Bahamas and Aruba, Jamaica.
Aruba, Jamaica. Ooh. Okay, I'm sorry.
But all of these communities, these island communities, are just frequently bombarded with thousands, 5,000 to 7,000 people on a daily basis. And if there's 2 ships, then it's a lot more. And a lot of these economies definitely run on tourism. And so a lot of these businesses definitely need that. That is not something we should strip from them completely, but a lot of times the communities or citizens within the community are not fully thought of in this process. So yes, they're making money, but a lot of times there's foreign investors that are making money. So the hotels on the shoreline where all these people are staying for the night, it's not going into the hands of a Jamaican.
Well, and what happens at these resorts is that it's pretty much the most beautiful areas on the islands are completely cordoned off for primarily rich white people to enjoy while they're being served by the native Jamaicans. I remember I brought this up with someone recently, a boomer, of course, and they're like, well, our tips help them maintain a livable wage. I'm like, no, God. It was one of those where I'm like, there are so many things wrong with that statement that I'm not even going to start.
Right.
Because I'm like, yeah, like your point of that, like these hotels are owned by typically not native groups.
Foreign investors usually.
Yeah, foreign investors. They're completely employed by the native cheap labor. A whole lot of bad to that.
Their economies depend on it. So there has to be a solution. And I took a class, the sustainable tourism class, that talks about like how you shift the power a little bit and let them showcase their culture in the way that they want to, but not forcing them to do it either. Because there was a lot of that in my class of like, it is okay to learn about a culture and have them, I'm thinking like Hawaii when they do all their dances and things like that. It's very educational and it's entertaining and it's all these things. It can be good, but when you're forced to do it day after day after day after day after day, it starts to lose its value to you. And it's no longer as special as a native to do this because you're just performing it for money. And so there's this fine line of like making money. It's kind of like the Ikigai line. Have you heard of that?
No.
It's this concept of finding what you love, finding what you're good at, finding what is needed in the world, and finding what you can get paid for. Whatever that center of the Venn diagram is, that's your Ikigai. That's your perfect solution. You'll never work a day in your life because you're just going to enjoy what you're doing while you're making money and helping the community and all that kind of stuff. So there needs to be a movement and a lot of thought that goes into how to empower these communities to take back some of the power from foreign investors and things like that, while not just completely collapsing their economy in the process. Give them the tools and teach them how to do that.
Real quick, want to throw in another both environmental and human disaster that cruises are. If cruises are incinerating or dehydrating their waste, they will usually offload that onto the island that they dock at, which is then waste in a landfill on this often smaller island that the people have to deal with.
Because there's just not room on a ship. Same with airplanes. Like they have to offload every place that they stop, all of their stuff before they can reload and move on. But the final thing under the human side of things is kind of a more personal to the passengers on these ships. And it's a kind of a reason why I have never really been interested in a cruise. It's because I didn't even know the environmental thing before. I was like, I don't know if I want to do that. But like cruises are hotbeds for getting sick. Like COVID-19, that I saw one of the COVID ships.
I forgot about that.
I saw the people trapped on board. I'm sure it was a Princess Cruise. It was something coming into California. It was one of the first that was just docked out there for days. This is way beginning of COVID, before they even shut anything down. And out on vacation in California and San Francisco area. And we literally were watching the COVID cruise come in. We were being escorted and they were going up to a specific marina, but they were being docked up in just north of San Francisco. And in fact, we actually got kicked out of our hotels because it happened to be a hotel that was owned by the state. And so the state were like, yeah, no, we're taking all of our hotels that we own and we're putting all the COVID people in here because we have no idea how else to contain them. And they cannot go home and they can't go anywhere else. So they're going to be monitored here. It was kind of a wild trip to like see it, have videos of it. And then we were literally on top of a mountain out of service. And then I got service and the hotel had like called me 6 times. And I was like, this is weird. And they're like, you need to like come back immediately. We're going to have to throw your shit out because these people are coming and we need everybody out of here kind of deal. We're like, well, we got an hour hike down. We're 2 hours away. So like, probably expect us in like 4 hours kind of deal. And you're like, okay, that's a fine timeline. And they booked us in a new hotel and all that kind of stuff. But it's not just COVID as an issue. A lot of times you see people get sick with, I don't know what the common one is, but a lot of times you see these illnesses just kind of run through because you're in such tight quarters and you can't get away from people and stuff like that. And you bring those same sicknesses onto these islands that you're stopping at. And so there's just a lot of things to be thought about when trying to make cruises more sustainable and healthy. We're talking about a hedonistic sustainability and bring that term into this concept. It's like people enjoy the cruises and they bring economic prosperity to some of these islands and things like that. But how can we make it good for people on the island, people on the cruise, the environment, kind of everybody involved? But there are some people thinking about it. So we have one company coming out of Norway.
I'm excited to hear you pronounce this.
I was just going to say, I'm going to butcher it like nobody's business. Hurtigruten?
Coming
out of Norway. I found this in the Times article. It's very good. I will have it linked down below in the description. But the Times did this deep dive article on this cruise company. They kind of lay out some of the statistics we were talking about earlier about like why cruises are bad and all that kind of stuff. So it's a really good read. But this company has basically said it's built its last fossil fuel powered ship. So they're really transitioning to green energy in whatever form they can kind of engineer. Because ships take a lot of power. And one of the things they've thought about is batteries. But at this point in time, with the amount of batteries they think they could put on there, they could probably go 300 miles before they would need to charge up again. And that's just not realistic for a cruise. Maybe some of the like little river cruises and things like that could think about it. But it's definitely something that long term, the Caribbean, the big Mediterranean ones, that's not feasible. But in 2016, this company began outfitting ships that use power from the grid when tied up in port instead of burning their own fuel. So this technology can basically reduce the air pollution ships use when docked by up to 70%. So this is just one of the things you can kind of think about when transitioning to a green way. It's like if we can't do it yet out on the ocean, how can we do it when we're onshore? And as everybody starts to transition onshore electricity to green, clean energy, you can start to tap that into the cruise system as well.
So it's basically a hybrid.
A little bit, yeah. And when you go to the article, I highly recommend checking it out again. The ships look cool, but it's like a new form of a sail ship. It's not like official sails. They talk about maybe having sails that like kind of fold out, but they're going to have solar on board and things like that. So they have grand visions for this carbon neutral operation that they're aiming for in the year 2040. So a pretty short deadline for this, considering the amount of technology that needs and innovation and updates that need to happen to the shipping industry in general. They're on it and they're working and investing. I think they have $70 million invested into different enterprises or opportunities in R&D and things like that. So I'm excited to kind of follow that one because there are some cruises I think would be interesting. Like I would like to do one in Norway, which is fitting that this company is in Norway. So it's something that I could probably do in the future and, test out their technologies. But so there are people working on it in the cruise realm, companies that are interested in upgrading or investing in a new way of doing things. But on the ship side of things, there's also been a lot of improvements too. And this may have been a ship that you've seen in the news recently, but they're the really weird sailless wind-driven ships. So they just have these like masts that are a little bit wider. They look like airplane wings, essentially, on top of ships. And coming out of the Nordic region again, a Sweden company.
Represent.
Wallenus Marine, AB. Also have a link for them from I learned about them on the World Economic Forum, so find them there. They have a design out called the Ocean Bird, which is currently being sailed in the Baltic Sea. It's delivering automobiles from different countries. So it's in use right now. But these sails look like airplane wings, essentially. And so while they are air-driven, powered through these airplane wing-like sails, they do have engine backups because
you gotta.
Yeah, at this point in time, we can't 100% rely on this stuff. But it aims to save 90% of the carbon emissions compared to a conventional ship that is run on regular fuel. So that's a huge savings, even if they have to tap in every once in a while or speed it up or supplement to reduce 90% of the emissions. We could drastically reduce the amount that not only cruises, but just the shipping industry in general can do that. It says it takes the ocean bird about 12 days to cross the Atlantic compared to 8 for the fuel-powered ships. So it is going to be a little bit slower because you're relying on these trade winds that are crossing. When we think about it on a supply chain side of things, those extra 4 days can suck in the beginning. But once everybody's used to that kind of timeline, you just learn you need to ship things out 4 days earlier or order them 4 days earlier if you need them on a specific timeline. So transitioning a fleet to this doesn't seem unreasonable. It was different if it was like it takes 30 days compared to the 8. That would be an issue. 4 doesn't seem like it's outrageous.
I'm just struck by so often in sustainability, it's what's old is new again.
Yes.
In this case,
it really is.
Or like I was watching a similar thing of boats being built out of wood. Who would have thought?
Wow, we're crazy.
And they were like large ships. But yeah, I mean, what's old is what's new. But I mean, still, most cruise ships right now, everyone say it with me, suck.
They're not great.
That's our message today. Stop taking those. Cut it off. Cut it out. And that's all I have for you today.
Yeah. Just think about more sustainable options. Now you know you can take the flight. You want to go to the Jamaica? Take a flight.
And most of all, don't take a cruise.
Save the planet. Save yourself.
All right. Until next time.